Welcome to Literary Overview, as we dive into answering the question, what is inside literature? From the perspective of the structural elements that make up a literary work. Specifically, we will cover literary form, context, structure, voice, setting, narrative arc, characters, and symbolic elements such as motifs. The concept of literary form has its roots in the broader understanding of literature and its structures, which dates back to ancient times. Ancient Greek philosophers such as Plato and Aristotle discussed the concept of literary genres and forms in their works. Aristotle in particular classified poetry into three main forms, epic, lyric and dramatic. His work Poetics extensively discussed the elements of drama, defining aspects like plot, character and spectacle, which laid the groundwork for understanding literary form. Throughout history, various cultures and literary traditions have developed their own theories, which naturally reflect the way that literary form is an integral part of cultural change. 6 quick reasons why an understanding of literary forms helps us to understand what's inside literature is number 1, understanding and analysis. It helps readers, scholars and critics to understand the structure, style and characteristics of different types of writing. By categorising works into forms such as poetry, prose, drama, fiction, non-fiction, it becomes easier to analyse and discuss the unique elements and conventions. Number 2, communication and classification. By using the terminology of a specific literary form, it gives others an immediate understanding of what to expect in terms of structure, narrative, style and content. Number 3, appreciation of diversity. The more that you understand about literary form, such as Bob Dylan's lyrics being classified as a Nobel Prize for Literature, or the way that rap overlaps with poetry, you come to appreciate the diversity of human existence in a deeper way. Number 4, educational purposes. Most simply, it is easy to study literature when we know where it fits in a wider literary body. Number 5, historical and cultural context. So much of what we understand about life is the result of studying literature. Whether it is Dante's poetry that depicts political, religious, medieval figures, the development of Gothic literature as a reaction against Victorian propriety, or Viktor Frankl's use of memoir after surviving the Holocaust, literary form provides invaluable insights. Lastly, number 6, critical analysis. Scholars and critics often use the categorization of literary forms to compare works, trace influences, and conduct critical analysis. This allows for a deeper examination of themes, styles, and techniques within and across different forms. Understanding the context in which a work was created is a helpful place to begin. Although a work may not perfectly conform to a set of values and ideals, placing a work within a literary period often uncovers a reaction against a prior period, for example, Romanticism's rejection of Enlightenment rationalism, or postmodernism's rejection of grand narratives and absolutes. When we consider a literary work, to borrow from Louise Rosenblatt's analogy, as a living part of an orchestral piece where the author, text and reader all play a part, the role of considering the context in which a work is read is also a part of forming a valuable response to the text. As we zoom into the elements inside the text, we need to understand the structure or the order in which the author has arranged their plot, character and ideas. The structural decision reflects ideas and positions the reader in specific ways. For example, chronological. Harper Lee's novel To Kill a Mockingbird gradually reveals events and discoveries through the eyes of a child, so that the author too will have the same epiphanies about race, poverty and injustice. In media res, in the middle of the action. Homer's epic poem, The Odyssey, or J.D. Salinger's novel The Catcher in the Rye, immerse the reader into events and create an immediate emotional intensity as the tone in which to view the rest of the work. Non-linear. David Mitchell's novel Cloud Atlas or Colin McCann's short story Sisters use non-linear structures in order to span past and present time periods and relay multiple perspectives to reveal the complexity of the human experience. McCann's inclusion of memory and thought also mirrors the fragmented nature of consciousness. Frame narration, a narrative within a narrative. Mary Shelley's epistolary novel Frankenstein or Joseph Conrad's novella Heart of Darkness are examples of frame narration. Frames can serve multiple purposes. For example, Shelley embedded the creature's narrative inside Victor's narrative within Walton's to make the tale seem like a discovered manuscript, and secondly, to move the reader from exterior concerns of society into the concerns for the heart of the novel, virtues of compassion and equality. Conversely, frame narration can be used to change the pace, utilise a different perspective or voice, or reflect the constructed nature of composition itself. These are just a few of the structures that authors commonly use. Others include parallel plot lines, episodic, circular structures, and of course, hybrids. For example, Calvino's novel If on a Winter's Night a Traveller is structured as a series of interconnected stories, yet the narrative constantly shifts and reinvents itself. It plays with different genres and storytelling techniques while telling the story of a reader trying to read a book that continually changes. Margaret Atwood's novel Hagseed is also of particular mention. It utilises the same 5-act structure of Shakespeare's play The Tempest and opens each chapter with an epithet from the play and its adaptation. Within each chapter is the inclusion of rap and metafictive references to the construction of a play within a novel about Shakespeare's play. Lastly, as a prime example of postmodern modern playfulness, Danielewski's novel House of Leaves is noted for its complex and unconventional structure. It combines multiple narratives, footnotes, typography variations, non-linear storytelling to create a layered and immersive reading experience. The voice of a text refers to the perspective of the narrator who is telling the story. Voice plays a significant role in shaping the overall impact and meaning of a text, as it shapes the reader's experience, influences the interpretation of the content, and adds a unique and personal dimension to the literary work. Some examples of narrative voice include reliable narration. The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank or Jasper Jones by Craig Silvey are both examples. Where one is the authentic voice of Anne Frank, Craig Silvey manages to capture an authentic and reliable voice of the 13-year-old character Charlie in his novel Jasper Jones. Conversely, the use of unreliable narration, such that is used in the novel Fight Club, adds complexity to the story. The protagonist suffers from dissociative identity disorder, and this condition creates a situation where he is not always aware of his own actions or the true nature of his reality. In fact, the character Tyler, who initially appears as a separate person, is eventually revealed to be an alter ego of the narrator. Switching to perhaps the most common form of narration, omniscient narration, as the term omniscient means all-knowing, and many novels use this narrative voice in order to engage the reader in a range of characters' perspectives. Tolstoy's famous work, War and Peace, utilises omniscient narration as an observer, commentator, philosopher, and historian who is then able to help the readers understand the impact of war on society and individuals in a broad scope. Zooming down into limited narration or limited third person, George Orwell's novel 1984 is an excellent example, where the reader follows Winston and his experiences and are not able to access any further perspectives, but only see all events and the world through Winston's eyes. The inability to see outside of the singular character's view creates a greater alignment with the character and more significant shock and tragedy for the reader. Moving into first-person narration, it's a narrative technique where a story is told from the perspective of the characters using the pronoun I, often capturing unique idiom and slang such as Holden in J.D. Salinger's novel Catcher in the Rye, use of the term phony when he rejects American society at the time. There is a particular richness and effectiveness of storytelling that's formed through the intimacy and subjectivity that the reader gains access to within the work. Perhaps the least common narrative voice, second-person narration is a style in which the story is told from the perspective of you, addressing the reader as a participant or observer of the events. Looking at the quote on the screen from Jay McInerney's Bright Lights, Big City, it's quite hard to achieve, but by speaking directly to the reader through the second-person pronoun, the author breaks the fourth wall and involves the reader in the action of each page, so that you become the main character. The setting. The time and place where the story occurs. The setting establishes the background, atmosphere and context in which the events take place. Yet more than this, the setting has the power to carry symbolic meaning, such as the river that Huckleberry Finn travels down that represents freedom, both through the chance to make it to the Free States for Jim and the opportunity to escape Huck's father and indeed civilization. Or the culture and historical context is provided through the setting. For example, Charles Dickens' City in Great Expectations reveals the impact of urbanisation on mid-19th century London with all of the wealth, division, crime, immorality and elitism. Conflict and plot development. At other times, such as McCarthy's novel The Road, the post-apocalyptic setting that the father and son must travel through propels most of the plot development. An abandoned supermarket and an underground food bunker become more than places of setting. They become key aspects of reflecting on culture and staying alive. Imagination and transportation of the reader. The whimsical opening of The Hobbit is a blissful escape. The setting for Tolkien ultimately became a map of an entire mythological Middle-earth. He really did invest in setting, and it paid off. From Mordor to Hobbiton, we have been utterly transported into another world. Linked to wider socio-cultural message. Whether it's 1984's totalitarian setting or Richard Powell's The Use of Trees That Outlast Human Lives, setting also has the power to carry messages about politics, culture and society. A narrative arc refers to the trajectory of the narrative, which includes rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. The narrative arc provides a framework for understanding the overall shape and progression of a story. You'll notice on the screen the image of Freytag's pyramid that represents the most common stage approach to narrative arcs, with the exposition, an inciting incident, rising action, a climax or complication, falling action, and resolution. While this is the most common narrative arc structure, there are a range of trajectories that can be used in narrative writing inside a text. Kurt Vonnegut outlines a range of these. For example, his Man in Hole trajectory depicts an orientation of comfort that is impacted by a hole that the character descends into, only to recover and end the narrative in a better place than the narrative began. As you can see, there are a range of ways to plan or analyse the narrative arc for a text. Vonnegut has labelled some, such as Cinderella Rags to Riches, Quest, Tragedy, Plotline, but there are a myriad of possibilities when creating or analysing a narrative arc. And ultimately, it's important to consider what effect a particular narrative arc has on the meaning of the text. Characterization. Arguably, like casting in films, it is the characters in a piece of literature that capture us and best reveal aspects of humanity in ways that make us laugh, cry, or ponder the world more deeply. Good character development in literature involves a range of factors, and we will explore the top 5 now. Well-developed characters are multidimensional, possessing a mix of strengths, weaknesses, desires, fears, and contradictions. They have layers that make them feel human and relatable to readers. Analysing or developing seemingly contradictory attributes is one way to produce complexity and depth in a multidimensional character. Growth and transformation. The most famous characters, Scout Finch, Pip, Katniss, Bilbo, Hamlet, will grow and transform over the course of the narrative. overcoming fears, enduring trials, forgiving, gaining wisdom, enable characters to establish depth as they move from immaturity to maturity. Number 3, backstory. Providing a character with a backstory helps readers understand their motivations, traumas, and life experiences. The backstory shapes who a character is and influences their decisions and actions within the story. Finding flashbacks and memories are also central to strong analysis so that you can discuss underlying aspects of characterization. Moving on to number 4, one way that characters grow and have multi-dimensions is through internal conflict within themselves. Characters with inner conflicts, dilemmas, and struggles make for engaging storytelling. These internal struggles add depth and contribute to the character's development throughout the narrative. Understanding and discussing the interior life of a character is the heart of strong analysis. Additionally, external pressures from society or world events such as war, down to family tensions or cultural expectations, can frame the interior conflicts in a way that makes the character's development emblematic of ideas. For example, Adiga's novel The White Tiger captures the Indian class system and changing globalization, materialism, and individualism over traditional familial loyalty is captured in the views and choices of its protagonist. Lastly, number 5, just as the author needs a distinct voice, characters themselves must carry a distinct voice through their dialogue and actions, creates an authenticity to their portrayal. Having clear contrasts between the bitterness of one character and the optimistic naivety of another engages the reader through the comparative and distinct characterization. Moving beyond the literal level and into the symbolic, literature often conveys a metaphysical or conceptual idea through the use of symbolism. The way that power so easily corrupts human character is seen in the ring symbolism within Lord of the Rings, or Yorick's skull in Hamlet is used to symbolise the brevity of life, of mortality. Symbolism is a valuable way to express abstract ideas and resonate across cultures and time periods. This universality helps literature to transcend specific contexts and makes it more relatable to diverse audiences. Aesthetically, by using symbols creatively, writers can craft a more vivid and visually striking narrative. For example, in Golding's novel The Lord of the Flies, the conch shell represents order, civilization, and unity. And in the Harry Potter series, the scar on Harry's head symbolises protective love and loss through a traumatic experience, yet the lightning bolt scar alludes to the Greek deity Zeus and the powerful destiny in Harry's life. Whether you analyse an author's use of symbol or aim to write your own, symbolism adds layers of meaning to a piece, allowing for a more nuanced and complex exploration of themes, emotions, and ideas. It goes beyond the surface narrative, providing readers with the opportunity to engage in deeper interpretation. So now my hope is that as you come to consider literary works, you will have a greater understanding of textual integrity. That is, the overall coherence, consistency, and unity of a text. By looking inside a literary work to consider the structure, voice, use of setting, narrative arc, characters, and symbols, you can then come to evaluate the overall quality and wholeness of a literary work, considering how its various elements come together to create a meaningful and effective piece.